Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Special Report Online. I'm Brett Baer. If this is your first time aboard, welcome. It's a great forum to continue the conversation with our panel. Hear from you. Weigh in with questions, comments. Don't worry if you don't see it right away. Producers are putting it in as fast as they can. Our panel here, Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent with the Washington Examiner, Molly Hemingway, Senior Editor with the Federalist, and Rachel Bate, Congressional Reporter for Politico. We left off talking about that James Rosen exclusive. I want to rewind to talk about North Korea and the speech in Missouri. I think there was a soundbite. Yeah, we've got it. President Trump, he was talking about tax reform, but he ended up kind of going off on North Korea, and it just went all kinds of different ways. Take a listen.
We have tremendous support for this plan. Tremendous. Because these massive tax cuts will be rocket fuel. Little rocket man. Rocket fuel for the American economy. He is a sick puppy.
A sick puppy. All right, Byron. That obviously is getting reaction from the North. Apparently you can't call anybody a dog. It's a bad thing.
A transcript does not do him justice. You know, we came out with a serious response, which is another move to push China to do even more, to increase sanctions even more. It's kind of amazing at this point that their sanctions aren't all the way up to 11 across the board, but they're not. He actually talked about some serious things the administration can do today. But the fact is, this keeps happening, and this new missile seems to be the most capable yet that we've seen.
Darwin Teague says, "I'm stunned. I can actually see the online show." Woot, woot. It never actually works for me. So welcome aboard. Molly, it's a serious situation. I talked to somebody today who said that this is really as close as we've been since the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, and it's the culmination of decades of hard work that the North Koreans have put toward being at this moment. We failed utterly to constrain them decades ago, and now they are where they had tried to be for so long. And so this is very dangerous. If we couldn't get them to back off when they didn't have these capabilities, why would they back off right now when they are where they have worked so hard to be? But Byron said that it's amazing that the sanctions aren't already at 11. They're not even close to 11. And there's this idea that you can't really be tough on the sanctions because that would be really bad for the North Korean people. Well, war would be very bad for the North Korean people. And maybe a little bit of extreme pressure right now by China would be helping North Koreans avoid a really disastrous situation. And I think that's another interesting thing about this missile yesterday is it shows that Chinese envoy must have failed in his efforts there, and that's very frustrating.
Yeah, President Trump tweeting, just spoke to President Xi Jinping of China concerning the provocative actions of North Korea. Additional major sanctions will be imposed on North Korea today. The situation will be handled, something that he had said. On Capitol Hill, what is the feeling on Capitol Hill about what's next in this whole back and forth?
Well, there's a lot of worry. I think a lot of people on the Hill, both Democrats and Republicans, would like to see China step up in terms of putting pressure on North Korea. But, you have to ask yourself, when are we going to actually see this? I mean, the president might have got some sort of commitment from leaders in China today, but the reality is China hasn't done anything on this issue for years, and we have been asking them to for a long time. So it goes against their interests to go against North Korea. So how do we get China to step up their game on this? I'm skeptical that
I will say that they have done some, yeah. And maybe it is the provocative language. Maybe if it's the rocket man in the UN speech, maybe it is what the U.S. is doing to pressure China. But they have done more than they've ever done before in previous administrations.
Right. I wouldn't say that they've done nothing, but they also don't seem to do any more than the bare minimum that they're required to do. And so I'm also interested if maybe they thought things would go better after this envoy. That they didn't might give them reason to think about pushing a little bit harder than they have. China does have an interest in helping control the situation. If they don't if they don't work to control the situation, they lose a lot of power in that region. The U.S. will step in and start being more involved there. And I don't think China wants that. They also don't want economic repercussions that we could impose against them. So it'll be interesting to see. For me, it's more interesting to see how do they respond to this latest failure than how they've responded to previous ones.
Paul Joseph, 88K, says regarding North Korea, I just keep hoping our government has some covert, deep cover stuff going on. I don't want to know what it is. I just want it to work. I mean, we've talked about it. There is a lot of stuff going on that we don't know everything about. There's cyber stuff going on. There are weapons that the Navy has that have not been talked about, Byron. But the reality is that how effective that technology is only as good as the last time they take down a missile. And
that's right. I mean, look, I have the same feelings. I hope we have something going on. And you know, each time they do one of these things, I hope we can sabotage it or shoot it down. And we haven't done, well, we don't know about the sabotage. We haven't shot one down yet because, in part, we haven't decided to take it to that level. And also, if we missed,
exactly.
It would be a major, major problem for us as well. But clearly, at some point, given the position of the United States across the administrations, across the parties, if they continue and they can actually weaponize a warhead that they can shoot into the continental United States, we're going to have to do it.
China enjoys watching their little bulldog irritating the U.S. I do think that there is a part of the China thing that's, you know, we're not talking about their human rights violations. We're not talking about, you know, them stealing things from U.S. companies. Every time we talk to them, we talk about North Korea.
Right. And I think they have enjoyed the rise of North Korea, and they've certainly tolerated it and encouraged it over the years. I don't know if they're enjoying it right now. I don't know if they really relish the idea of North Korea being a nuclear power, both for, well, I mean, just even for instance, that it makes it more difficult to keep Japan or South Korea from going nuclear if you allow North Korea to be nuclear. That's bad news for China. So I don't think they're enjoying it particularly. I think they're trying to navigate the situation and not doing such a great job right now.
Yeah. I do think there's more war talk now about actual military action than there ever has been. And when somebody starts in a private meeting talking about how you're going to get the South Koreans into the 3,200 bunkers that are in Seoul, that's eye-opening.
It's petrifying. I mean, yeah, I think we're all hoping that there's some sort of contingency plan on this, right? But they're getting closer and closer. Do we know how long it's going to be until they actually have that capability to reach us with that sort of?
I mean,
we don't.
Yeah.
It's an estimate. You know, it's a matter of months.
Matter of months.
Yeah.
But the reason people in the administration and others are talking to people like you and telling you this stuff is they want the public to know that there actually are options that the United States is considering. This kind of talk that, you know, there's no options.
No military option. Oh, there
are military options. They're really, really bad if you're
ugly
on the Korean Peninsula. But I think the administration wants it out, that they are gaming this thing through and thinking of everything they can do in this situation.
All right, let's talk about, go ahead. You want to finish?
I just think it's also not just whether they have the capability of reaching the U.S., but whether there's a credible threat that they're going to do it. And I think that the American public don't just want to go to war because someone has nuclear capability. A lot of people have nuclear capabilities, is what they're going to do with that. And so North Korea would be well served to think about its communication strategy now that they've accomplished this.
Yeah, I mean, I was just there, and the mountains that face Seoul are 20 miles away, and it takes them a few seconds to roll out 1,500 artillery pieces. And so should we attack someplace in North Korea, they do this, they fire the artillery, and then you have 10 million people plus who are in the target line. So on that optimistic note, something back here, the debt ceiling vote. A couple people are saying, where are we on the debt? And are Chuck and Nancy going to be at the table at the end of the day?
So the debt ceiling deadline, last I heard, I think it was Monday from a Republican source. They're thinking it's going to come down in February sometime. So that's when we're going to have to see.
I guess I don't think they're talking debt ceiling.
You think they're talking spending?
The spending, the government
Woo!
spending.
I'm glad this is a long show. So my Republican sources are telling me today that the plan right now is for Republicans to try to pass a short-term spending bill that kicks the can down the road into January. However,
it's so very Congress.
Yes, very Congress. However, I am unsure that enough Senate Democrats will come on board with this idea, because Democrats see Christmas and the holiday as sort of this perfect time to leverage what they want on Daca and a dreamer fix. And a lot of them are saying, we're not going to vote for any spending bill unless you actually include a Daca dreamer fix in this spending bill. Now, obviously, Republicans do not want to do that. The president says he doesn't want to do that. Conservatives, if something like that were to come down the pipeline and there was a bipartisan deal to do that, they would go crazy, and Speaker Paul Ryan's speakership could potentially be in jeopardy. So I'm not convinced that we won't see a shutdown in December, just because I don't know that 8 Senate Democrats will back a plan to kick this into January. We're just going to have to see where that goes.
It is amazing, the hypocrisy that we see. It's easy to track. Sometimes they forget we have tape, but or digital tape. A lot of Democrats had problems with putting anything on a government spending bill at the end of the year. It used to be like verboten. Now you're going to put DACA, you're going to put all kinds of things. CHIP, not a problem now.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a brokenness to the process, and that it just gets worse every single year. In addition to hypocrisy, which is a bad thing, it's just the complete lack of financial responsibility that you see from all members, almost all members of Congress. Their lack of concern about the debt service situation. I mean, they just don't care about how much we're spending. They never reform entitlements. They never actually care about any of the ways that we are hemorrhaging money, and I don't see any change to that in the future.
So does DACA stand alone and somehow get through?
Well, I think the thing to remember about DACA is that when the president announced his action on this, he put it off until March. I mean, that's forever. That's a long way away, and I don't think you can create a crisis atmosphere in December for something that's coming up in March. And I do think that the side that has the cleanest bill in terms of keeping the government in money until some period of time, this is going to win. And I think in this case, that's going to be Republicans.
I actually agree with him on that. I think that I spoke to a Democratic source today who, and actually we've talked to a lot of sources in House Democratic leadership who are really afraid of being accused of shutting down the government. And I think the argument about, Democrats in previous years have said we shouldn't attach any policy riders on this, being called hypocrites and saying Democrats are shutting down the government, that is going to be Republicans' greatest PR message and weapon on this, I think.
So does that mean
saying that the blame goes to the Democrats?
Correct, and I do think they might
This is
fold
like
on that.
Lucy and the football. They have never been able to do it. They've never been able to kick the football. Republicans blaming Democrats. It's always
I agree.
always
And they
Democrats.
control Congress, so that's tough, right? So how do you say but the reality is, like you had said, Democrats have always said they don't. When Democrats controlled the Senate, they said we're not going to do an Obamacare repeal because it's a policy rider. We don't do that on spending bills. Now they want to do a policy riding DACA fix on a spending bill, and that's going to be something Republicans are going to have to message that. But I do know that Nancy Pelosi is petrified of being accused of shutting down the government.
That is a good point, because you're right. Republicans have said we always lose these things.
That's why Mitch McConnell says we will not shut down the government.
We always lose. But on this situation, I mean, they lose when they're demanding that Obamacare be defunded as a result, as part of funding the government. But maybe that's old thinking. Maybe if they're actually pushing a clean bill and it's the other guys who are demanding some sort of rider be attached to it, maybe Republicans could actually win this.
But nobody wins in a government shutdown, do they?
I mean, I'm all for government shutdowns. So
just
you have to pass on this. Just shut it all down.
President Trump might be too.
What I find interesting is how this all came to be, and there was that deal back in, was it September, the Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi deal that Trump struck, and Republicans were just outraged and they thought it was inexplicable, and it turns out that maybe this is working out well for him and for them, for the Republicans. Mm-hmm. No?
I don't know that I don't know that any Republicans like where they are right now in terms of Christmas coming up, and they have to deal with DACA in a few months. They have to deal with spending in a couple of weeks. They want to get taxes done. That's why I think they're trying to kick the can into January, because they want to totally clear their plate from this so they can focus on tax reform, get that done, and then move to these other things that are going to be a lot more icky for Republicans.
LAOFAS, I don't know. Greetings from hurricane-devastated Puerto Rico. Is it's amazing how little 3.5 million American citizens matter in the mainland. There's lots of conservative Republicans here, but without a voice, the tax bill will be as devastating to Puerto Rico as Hurricane Maria was. Interesting. Well,
maybe they're talking about the distributional effect of the tax cuts and thinking maybe it's going higher to wealthier individuals than.
Don't know.
Well, it's hard to respond without knowing specifics.
Yeah, maybe get more specifics. I mean, another message. I did see a great piece on 60 Minutes about Jose Andres, the chef who worked in Puerto Rico from the beginning, serving all these meals. And it was pretty painful about the bureaucratic stalling of a lot of the things happening there.
Yeah, I've been doing heroic work there, and we've even learned, and we all have to say that this is pretty much passed from the news now. I mean, when was the last time we saw a Puerto Rico story in just a daily newscast? Although we have had news that it apparently killed many more Puerto Ricans than we thought originally. And so the Jose Andres story is a really great story. He's been doing heroic work there.
All right, let's take a couple more questions. I got to go. They like you, they like Molly. You're okay.
Just okay.
You're okay. Yeah. Let's see. It's hard to get Democrats to own it when the MSM covers for them, mainstream media. You know, there are people out there that say, you got to hold the line. The old Ted Cruz, you know, when he was trying to put the Obamacare repeal on that spending bill. Now it's reverse. And is it going to be another fiscal cliff that we have to head into as they're voting on tax reform? It's going to be fascinating.
It is. Also, it does seem like they're unable to do anything unless they're faced with a deadline. So they're just running up against every deadline that they have to hit, and that's the only way that they're going to get things done. But at least there are some deadlines that they have to.
All right, final word here. This Matt Lauer thing is just shocking today, and I think it took everybody by surprise. The president went to Twitter and said this: "Wow, Matt Lauer was just fired from NBC for inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. But when will the top executives at NBC and Comcast be fired for putting out so much fake news? Check out Andy Lack's past." He's just giving suggestions there. So now that Matt Lauer is gone, when will the fake news practitioners at NBC be terminating the contract of Phil Griffin? And will they terminate low ratings Joe Scarborough based on the unsolved mystery that took place in Florida years ago? Investigate. You know, the last one, there is no unsolved mystery. An intern died in his office when he was a congressman. They did an autopsy, and there was not an unsolved mystery.
Right. And you have to remember the president is a former featured performer at NBC, and there's almost this kind of settling old scores sense to his tweets. But you know, on the Lauer thing, it was very odd the way NBC announced it in the morning. They had their two anchors of the Today Show go on, read a statement. They clearly didn't know what was happening. They said, "We're sorry, this is all we know, and we're telling you this." So it was a striking way to announce it, and it left the public in the dark. I mean, when CBS fired Charlie Rose, we knew the evidence was absolutely overwhelming, and nobody said, "Gee, why did they fire Charlie?" But in this case, they didn't mention it. Now, as the hours have gone by, we've seen some really, really serious stuff, and what's striking about it is some people, like me, have tried to separate the most serious cases, the Harvey Weinstein, the Louis C.K., the Charlie Rose, and now Matt Lauer, from some of the less serious cases. But there seems to be kind of a never-ending supply of really serious cases.
I will say, go ahead. I was just going to say, I wanted to go back to Trump's tweet about this. And the interesting thing about that is that the president seems to be sort of basking in the downfall of either political or media opponents when it comes to sexual harassment. And, you know, from covering a lot of this stuff on the Hill, you know, I can tell you that it spans both parties. And, you know, a lot of people think that trying to make this like a political thing or, you know, my enemies only have this problem. It's not It's not an ideological thing.
Well,
Right. No, I think that's true. Although I think so many people in Hollywood and the media are liberal that it seems like it's more of a liberal thing. But you're absolutely right. This is human nature. This is a problem that affects all sorts of people. But I do think it's interesting how so many people, these stories will come out and the executives will say, well, we had no idea. But then you'll get other details like how Matt Lauer had a button in his desk that enabled him to lock the door. I don't think those things happen outside of some oversight. And I think it's in executives' best interest and in companies' best interest to claim that they don't know what's going on. It seems like there might be cultures here that really could use some cleaning up in general.
I mean, this is a sea change because think about he was the face, essentially. After Brian Williams' issues, he was the face of NBC. And the highest paid person, clearly made a ton of money for the Today Show. And to swiftly, that quick, say to your number one asset, you're fired. I mean, that's significant movement.
Well, I also think it does speak volumes. And the question is, as Molly said, what did NBC News management know about this? Because, to tell you the truth, listening to it myself, if on Monday night they hear an allegation, it's the first time they've ever heard anything.
Right.
They're just stunned. They would not have fired their top talent within 24 hours without doing some due diligence and due process investigating into this. Yeah. So I think the very way in which they handled it suggests that they knew about this problem prior to Monday night.
And listen, I come from a place that this network has had its own problems, and we have dealt with them over the past year with Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly, and I think I've dealt with them well. But it is a sea change in the way not only media, but Capitol Hill and business overall is going to have to deal with this going forward.
Yeah. And that's why we're saying, I mean, from the Hill's standpoint, they're changing all these rules right now. Like they passed a bill today resolution today that would require all lawmakers and staffers to take sexual harassment training so they know what is considered sexual harassment and what
How about this? Start with leave your pants on in the office with other people around. That's just
good basic rule.
Just start there,
yeah.
And then, I don't know, don't send sex toys to colleagues and it's pretty easy.
It's also true that some of what we're in seems to be a bit of a sex panic, and that people are having trouble distinguishing between different types of allegations, and that people are being held to standards now that are a little different than they were prior to Hillary Clinton getting defeated, and those standards would have still been in play had she won the election. And I think that is a very confusing place for people to be. I don't really have a lot of sympathy for people who are not faithful to their spouse or who have all these problems as a result of their own bad choices. But I also think it's important for people to kind of calm down, evaluate, think through how to handle each of these allegations, and not just rush to destroy someone's career or life because there's an allegation.
And they're not always as,
cut and dry.
Yeah, as what you were saying. I mean, like we've heard people talk on the Hill about members like massaging someone's shoulder or, patting somebody on the rear, and maybe they thought it was funny, or like saying a joke about how somebody's legs look in a dress.
I think Joe Biden could be in trouble.
Yeah.
So
old school. It's just like it's almost like it's a generational thing. It's not almost like a generational thing. It is a generational thing, I think, on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, it is quite something. A lot of questions about how Charles is doing. He is still recovering. He is in a special place for his type of condition, and he's doing well. I emailed with him the other day. Had a good Thanksgiving. His family's with him, and still thinks that in a few weeks he's going to be able to bounce back fully, and we hope that's true. So we're pulling for him every day. But thanks for asking about him. I'll continue to update on the Real Show and on the online show as much as I can. All right, panel. Thank you. Have a great night. We'll do it next Wednesday. Control room, a little goodbye.